Okay, good. Thank you, Sophia. So welcome everyone. Today we are opening a new cycle of our webinars. Today we'll be rethinking livestock and particularly looking at economics, ecology, and real world systems. So for those that don't know me, I'm Claudia Costa. I'm the academic director at Food for Sustainability. As always, it is a pleasure to open this sessions that we aim to bring together research, practice, policy around one of the most contested but yet essential parts of our food systems, livestock. Livestock is indeed it's going to be the star of this session and the coming sessions. And livestock are often framed only in terms of emission or as a problem to be minimized. But we believe this is a very simple narrative, and behind it lies a much more complex reality. So when livestock is well managed, we know that herds can support soil fertility, landscape management, biodiversity, and the livelihoods of millions of rural people. The real challenge is not whether livestock has a place in the future, it is more about how to make that place more regenerative, fair, and particularly important, attentive to the local ecological and economic constraints. And to remind you also that this conversation comes at a very important moment in time because 2026 has been declared by the United Nations the International Year of the Rangelands and Pastoralists, with the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, leading this initiative. This is a powerful reminder to all of us that livestock are not just a commodity in global markets, but they are indeed part of these living landscapes and also culture that connect economy, ecology, and the community. And that's exactly what we are going to address today by looking how regenerative herds can actually be more productive profits and how we can implement it in practice. Just before we dive deeper into today's topic, let me also give you a brief overview of how the work of Food for Sustainability fits into this topic. So I will start with our Regenera Lab, which is our soil health and function laboratory. It's here where we study the biological, the chemical, and the physical dimensions of soil with a strong focus on microbial activity, soil function, and also the development of practical solutions for regenerative agriculture. Of course, if you want to know more, get in touch. You have here all the contacts. Also, in parallel, let me introduce to those that already don't know Ampliaqua. It's here in Ampliaqua that we work on circularity and resource efficiency, and we do this across the food production systems. We connect algae, fish, and vegetables in such a way that reduces waste and make better use of nutrients, water, and biomass. And if you look carefully to your left, you will see our bioreactor for controlled microbial propagation, where we designed tailor-made inocular that are adapted to specific crops and soil. Of course, this allows us to move from diagnosis to action and also to translate scientific knowledge into biological solutions that can support plant health, soil function, and of course, more resilient production systems. And we don't stop here. We go a little bit further. We take this into practice at our IDELE Rural Food Park, where we demonstrate that regenerative pastures can be not only resource efficiency, but also much richer in terms of nutrients. And as the saying goes, it's not the cow, it's actually the how. And in our experience, regenerative management can be associated with higher levels of omega-3s, antioxidants, and of course, fast soluble vitamins. Particularly, we've looked at this in the meat. So again, we are giving you another excuse to engage in a conversation with us. But if you are really, really into these topics and you want to know how this works in practice, we have to invite you to explore our summer program. This is an online and on-site learning for anyone who wants to go deeper into the topics that I've just mentioned. Our program covers soil health, bio-based solutions, nutrient density, something quite interesting is to look at how artists and chefs take into their work regeneration, but of course we'll also have digital tools for decision making, of course. This is a program that concludes with an immersive online experience in the beautiful setting of Peña Garcia, and here we truly combine fun with hands-on learning. And if I think you should know a little bit more, we have here the QR code for you. Just have a look and see what you think. And if you have any questions, you want to know more or to adjust this experience to your own reality, drop us a line and we'll be pleased to get in touch with you. So, ready to dive into our session? So, we are very, very pleased to have with us three speakers with complementary perspectives. We have Elizabeth Jackson. She's an associate professor of supply chain management and logistics. She's based at Curtin University and she works at the intersection of agri business, supply chain, and sustainability with extensive involvement in industry-led frameworks across the agri-food sector. And Elizabeth will speak about how sustainability frameworks for regenerative herds have been developed in Australia, how consumers' awareness is evolving, and why traceability still faces some important technical hurdles. And also a special thanks for Elizabeth because it's bedtime in Australia, and Elizabeth was kind enough to be here with you at this time of the night. So thank you so much. But we are also very pleased to welcome Zoé Guy. She's a researcher at IDELE, focusing on livestock systems, farm performance, and the transition towards more sustainable and efficient production models. Welcome, Zoé. And finally, but surely not least, Louise Manning. She's an academic and a consultant, and she brings a system level lenses on sustainable food systems, helping to connect on farm practices with markets, policies, and community resilience. Thank you also, Louise, for your availability. And I'm sure this debate will help us to move beyond these polarized debates to have something, conversations that are more ground and evidence based, particularly given that we are also in this international year of rangelands and pastoralists. So surely it's going to be a well-informed session. So now that we have started with the presentations, I will ask the team to start warming up our audience properly. So, Sophia, could you kindly put Slido on the stage? And while Slido is being presented for you, I will just very quickly remind you about our house rules. I can see Slidos. Thank you, Sophia. While invite you to log in, but let me just remind you that these webinars are recorded, so you know by now what to do if you are uncomfortable with a recording. Questions, of course, they are welcome. I will ask you kindly to place them in Slido or use the chat here in the Teams. And again, remember to remind you that you will be able to get a certificate by the end if you complete a very short questionnaire that probably the team by now has already placed it here in the chat. If you want to have a look, the sort of questions you'll be invited to answer by the end of the session, and we'll ensure that you have your certificate. So we have a QR code, we have a website, a browser, and the code. So I'm sure we already have participants in, right? Let me check. Sophia, can you? No, maybe not. Let's just wait a little bit more for everyone to join in. I invite you. This is no fun if you don't scan the QR code, if you're not in. It's just me and the team. It's much more fun for us to start prepared to our topic, a very interesting topic. Let's see what sorts of questions. Sophia? Okay. No one. Let's start. Anyway, while you're joined. So, do you know where is the largest share of livestock grazing lands in the world? Where do we have? Where is located the biggest livestock grazing land in the world? And thank you so much for for our votes. Great. So we have the options of dairy farms in Europe. This is a very intensive system, or should we turn to South America and look at feedlot systems, rangelands and pastures, so the grasslands worldwide, or is it indeed poultry and pigs units? And this is mainly indoors. So thank you so much for starting voting. I think we do have a clear indication for our audience. Let's turn into a few of these options. We know that the dairy farms are actually very important. They are a huge industry in Europe, but the question regarding the question that was posed is that these dairy farms are highly concentrated and they are relatively small in terms of area. So it's not the European dairy farms. Let's turn to South America feedlots. Feedlots indeed dominate some meat markets, but directly to land, they still represent a limited share of where livestock grazing land is. So it's not the feeding stocks system, feeding locked systems in South America. Then we have an option of poultry and pig. You're absolutely right. They are housed, so they don't graze. You're right. This is not the correct answer, which leaves us to the rangelands and pastures. You're absolutely right, which cover roughly 25 to 40% of the global land surface, and they still represent the main habitat for more than 50 of the world's grassland-based herds and flocks. So well done. Still important to raise the awareness to protect these areas because they still represent a huge part of this main habitat. Thank you so much for taking part. Let's look to the second question. So here we ask you the key benefit of regenerative livestock grazing for soil, a key benefit for soil. So first one, reducing organic matter because of trampling, increasing compaction to improve seedbeds. Compaction, maybe. Enhancing soil carbon and structure through manure and root growth, soil carbon. Eliminating weeds so that no cover is needed. So we have some potential synergies, several potential synergies from using regenerative livestock. But the question is the key benefits for the soil. Okay, so one of the first options was reducing organic matter. This is absolutely the opposite of the aims of regenerative grazing, isn't it? You're absolutely right. We aim to build organic matter, not burn it or destroy it. So definitely this is not the correct answer. But compaction is actually something that we want to prevent in our soils. Is one of the major problems in European soils. And we know that some compaction can occur with livestock, but the goal is for sure to avoid harmful compaction and to promote soil porosity. So compaction is not our our option here, and now we are left with the soil carbon and with suppression. I would say that weed suppression is also one of the synergies that we can see by using livestock. And we know that this is actually a very important role from livestock controlling biomass. And if we look about its role in terms of fire prevention, this can be very, very important and interesting tool. But here we are talking about key benefit for soil. So the correct answer, you are absolutely right, enhancing soil carbon and structure through manure, root growth, and better plant cover, which of course improves water retention, nutrient cycling, and long-term pasture productivity. Thank you. We are on to something. I think we still have one other question. Yes, right. Again, thinking about these regenerative livestock systems, how does herd health typically affect farm profitability? So here, what we are doing is we are trying to link health with profitability. Let's see, increases costs, so profitability always falls. There is no real impact on profits over time. It reduces vet and mortality costs and improves productivity, or it only improves animal welfare, no impact on the economics. Again, we have consensus in the room. No one really thinks that health is actually a cost. Well, we know that some interventions cost money, but we know that healthy herds usually reduce losses by a greater scale. So definitely not increases costs, so profitability falls. We know also that health strongly affects performance and costs. So we cannot say that it doesn't have a real impact on profit over time. You're absolutely right. And we also know that welfare and economics are closely linked. So the best answer here is that it reduces veterinarian mortality costs and improves productivity because healthier animals gain weight faster, because they reproduce in a more reliable way, they need fewer drugs and replacements. So we are indeed boosting efficiency and profitability per animal per hectare. So well done, everyone. Thank you so much for taking part. I think now we are into the topic. I think we have warmed up. Elizabeth, I will now call you to the floor. I know that we are going to share from our ends, but the floor is yours whenever we have the presentation up. And here she is. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Claudia, for the very warm introduction, and my sincere thanks to the Academy for the opportunity to join such fascinating people on the panel today. I'm very much looking forward to this. I had quite a lot of difficulty cramming everything I want to say to you today into 10 to 15 minutes. So I'm going to do my very, very best to stick to the timeline. I will put my email address in the chat when I've finished. If anybody has some questions for me that we don't get time to answer today, you're most welcome to email me afterwards. So I'm relying on someone else to drive the slides for me. So if we could start, please, with my first slide. So it's very important in the Australian context for me to start off with how our industry is structured, because it's a very, very unique structure of marketing of agricultural products, but also of research income. And what you can see here is a diagram, a sort of a collage of Australia's 15 what we call research and development corporations. And you can see that there is essentially a research and development corporation, or as we say in Australia, RDCs. If you know an Australian, you know that we like to abbreviate everything, and we call these the research and development corporations, RDCs. You can see there's essentially one for any agricultural commodity that you can think of. So there's grains, dairy, pork, eggs, cotton, fish, sugar, horticulture, wool, forestry, red meat, wine, and then there's an interesting one there called Agri Futures, which is the RDC for chicken meat, and everything else. So AgriFutures looks after unusual agricultural products like the farming of spices, so ginger, for example, and also products like unusual niche products like camel milk, for example. But what is very, very important about the RDCs is that they are a levy mechanism, and farmers in Australia, whatever you produce, whatever a farmer produces, pay a compulsory levy. So every time a farmer sells a cow, a sheep, a goat, produces a bottle of wine, produces a ton of grain, produces some fish or some sugar or what have you, they pay a levy into the RDCs, and this is how Australia's agricultural research funding is generated. And one of the priorities that each of the RDCs has recently, well, in the last 10 or 15 years, has focused on is the concept of data collection, and very, very high quality data collection to demonstrate the sustainability of each of these products. Next slide, please. And so we have a suite, in Australia, we have a suite of what we call sustainability frameworks. And again, this is a collage of some examples of the sustainability frameworks. So there is a sheep sustainability framework, which covers sheep, meat and wool production. Beef has a sustainability framework, dairy, chicken meat, eggs, pork, grains, cotton, and there are other industries that are emerging with their sustainability frameworks. And it is indeed the RDCs that not only have control over the administration and governance of the sustainability frameworks, but they also fund the work that needs to be put in to keeping them going. Next slide, please. We've also, believe it or not, got a sustainability framework for agriculture in general. So this is the Australian Sustainability Framework. And I'll also, just to let you know, on my last slide, I've got references for all of these. So you can, if the slides are available, you can just go and click on the link and it takes you straight to the documents. But you can see from the Australian Agricultural Sustainability Framework, there are essentially three components to it. There's the environmental stewardship in the green, there's the economic resilience component in the yellow or orange, and then there's also in the blue, there's the people, animals and community. And each one of these has metrics associated with the performance of agriculture in general. If I could just go to the next slide, please. So that's the Australian Agricultural Sustainability Framework, but the more commodity specific frameworks have what I would call 4 common pillars, and I've got some examples here. So unlike the 3 pillars that the Australian Agricultural Sustainability Framework has, the more specific commodity sustainability frameworks, what they have in common is these 4 pillars. And I've got examples here from the Pork Sustainability Framework. Just to declare a conflict of interest, I am on the reference group for the Pork Sustainability Framework. That's on the left-hand side. The top one is from the Sheep Sustainability Framework, which I'm on the board for. And then the bottom one is the Beef Sustainability Framework. But what you can see from these 3 diagrams is that there are 4 pillars, and generally there are 4 pillars in common. So there is people. People feature, people and the management and the prosperity of people feature in all the sustainability frameworks. Then the commodity itself, whether it's the pigs themselves, the sheep, the cattle, the grains, and particularly for livestock, measuring the health and welfare of those livestock. And then the prosperity of the planet itself, so the environmental credentials and measuring appropriately the environmental credentials, and also the prosperity. And this is about the economics, because nobody is economics and finance, because nobody is trying to make an argument that that economics and finance and earning money isn't absolutely critical to all of these sustainability frameworks. So just to summarise this this slide, the sustainability, each of those commodity sustainability frameworks do have those 4 common pillars. And I should also say before we move on that each of the sustainability frameworks, if anyone's interested in the theoretical background of them, they are grounded in the GRI standards 2021 and the universal standards, and a little bit informed by the UN SDGs as well. So they are, like I said, theoretically informed by accounting standards. So thank you very much. Next slide, please. So what I've got here is a real zoom in shot of something of one of the sustainability frameworks that I'm very familiar with, and that's the Sheep Sustainability Framework, which of course covers sheep meat and wool. And this is just a little snapshot from the 2025 annual report from page 9, and it just gives you a little indication of what is measured, how it's measured, and how those measures are reported as well. And you can see here lamb survival is one of our metrics in the blue line. There's another metric for adoption of best practice management, and then there's another metric for shearing welfare of the sheep. Now, this is just an example of the metrics that come underneath the caring for sheep pillar. So you'll remember we had 4 pillars, and this one is for caring for sheep. And what the sustainability framework aims to do is collect data over time to demonstrate transparency and performance over time. Now, in the sheep sustainability framework, there are 41 indicators. These the blue lines, there are 41 of those. Unfortunately, this is still very much a work in progress. And of those 41 indicators, only 15 still only have one metric measuring them. You can see here lamb survival has 2 metrics measuring that, whereas adoption of best practice management only has 1 metric. And our aim is to build the reliability and validity of each of these items with not too many metrics, but enough metrics to be robust. So you can see in terms of the reporting, this happens over a period of years, but also in the sheep sustainability framework, we look at the trend as well. And if you do want to go and have a look at the sheep sustainability annual report, you'll see that each of the metrics is accompanied by these little icons which indicate a trend. And the board and the steering committees have discussed each one of these metrics and how and what we think is happening in terms of improvement or not improvement, or just steady performance. So this is just a little teeny tiny snapshot example of how, well, at least the sheep sustainability framework is presented, and the types of and how it's organised. So next slide, please. So the other point about these sustainability frameworks is to be able to consider different industries and review against peers. I do hope you can see this slide nice and clearly. There is a lot going on, and I do have to credit Robin Leeson for this slide and the next slide. She's a a very, very, very prolific consultant, STR Consulting in Australia, and she is doing a lot of work to support all of the sustainability frameworks. And she's produced this wonderful, wonderful graphic here that looks at the features of each of many of the sustainability frameworks. In this case, it's the Pork Sustainability Framework, Beef Sustainability Framework, Dairy, and the Australian Agricultural Sustainability Framework, and the one for chicken meat. So animal products and the Australian Sustainability Framework. And you can see each of the features. So she's got governance and oversight, global commitment, purpose and objectives, scope, and so on and so forth. And she's mapped which of these features each of these sustainability frameworks contain. And you can, what's lovely about this diagram, this map, is you can see that the beef and dairy sustainability frameworks, they are indeed the most mature. They are the oldest of the sustainability frameworks in Australia. They are in excess of 10 years old. So they are very mature. They've got lots of really great data behind them. And yeah, so the dairy sustainability framework really does a good job of covering these key features. The beef sustainability framework is pretty good, but you can see with the assurance one, it's still sort of in development phase. But the pork sustainability framework is still very, very, very much a work in progress. It's only been going for the last 18 months or so, so there's still a lot of work to do in terms of looking at the data that are available to look at the sustainability against those 4 pillars in Australia's pork industry. So I really like this diagram because it not only demonstrates the sustainability framework's power, not only for looking inside the commodity or the product itself, but also comparing against peers. If I could have the next slide, please. This is another wonderful, wonderful diagram that Robin has created for the chicken meat sustainability framework, and it essentially maps all the metrics, all the metrics within the chicken meat sustainability framework, and again, and you can see the different colours represent those 4 pillars. So I can't actually see, but blue will represent one of the pillars, orange, and so on and so forth. So it plots the importance to stakeholders of each of those metrics and the importance to industry. And as you go further out the diagram, the metrics obviously become more and more important because we've recognised that they're really the 2 main audiences for the sustainability frameworks. And the idea is to look at these, to look at where these metrics are plotted and see what needs to be done, if anything, to move them and over time. So, for example, you can see just at the bottom there, there's a metric for cybersecurity. Now, I imagine, in the event of a cybersecurity breach, or if there's a series of breaches, that might shift to another point in the chart. And if it does need to be shifted up or down, what's required to make that happen? What strategic planning is required to make that happen? So that's another fantastic diagram that I wanted to show you of what can be done with these data. So next slide, please. So the underlying principles of what we're trying to do here is look at supply chain transparency, agri-food supply chain transparency, and the concept of prove it. If you're, Australian agricultural commodities are amongst the most expensive in the world, and we make an enormous amount of claims about the quality of our produce, and the idea of we'll prove it. Very specifically in terms of the the product quality, but also the ethical standards and best practices that are being undertaken in this country to produce these food products. But we're constantly aware of the problem of greenwashing. And so this is why there are such strict governance frameworks around how the sustainability frameworks are developed and they mature. So also the concept of the three flows of supply chains. Of course, in relation to the little diagram I've got on the side, very intuitive. But of course, with supply chains, we of course have flows of product. The food that flows from the farming to processing to distribution and so on and so forth. We've also got money. The money that is transacted in the value creation process through our supply chains. But what we're also seeing is the importance of the flow of data and the pursuit of proving what we're doing, because we as a nation, we've got this structure of the RDCs, we've got this levy funding from farmers, and so we have this access to data. And the old adage about if you're not telling a good news story, how does anyone know that it happens? And we're using the data that we have at our disposal to be able to tell that good news story and prove what we're doing in terms of our sustainability in our agri-food supply chains. So next slide, I'm nearly finished. The last couple of slides are dedicated to me and my research projects rather than what's happening in Australia as a whole. And I really wanted to tell you about two projects. This pork project on the left-hand side, which is nearly finished, and a sheep project that's due to finish in the next couple of months. So the pork project that I've been involved in is looking at the development of very sophisticated Bluetooth and RFID tags for pork producers, looking at the pigs' mobility, their body temperature, their drinking and their eating activities, and setting up a data collection system for essentially to manage and monitor their animal welfare throughout the lifetime of the pig. We're also doing a lot of we've also done a lot of consumer sentiment studies with this project, and I'll share just an insight in a second. But the other project is for the sheep industry. Interestingly, we've had RFID technology mandated in Australia this year, and I've got a picture of the two different types of tags. So the top tag there is our old-fashioned, very basic, it's just a piece of plastic. But now for sheep, whether you're producing wool or sheep meat, we have to have these RFID-enabled tags. And even though this has been mandated throughout Australia, there has been significant pushback, and it's come from reasons for biosecurity in the country, and our unbridled fear of foot and mouth disease and lumpy skin disease. It has been mandated in the cattle industry, but the sheep industry this year has experienced significant pushback against this technology. So we've been trying to work out why this is and what can be done to remedy that amongst producers. So if I can just go to the next slide. So this is some findings that have been recently published from the beginning of our work with the pork industry on that consumer sentiment and what consumers think of having traceability in terms of digitally monitored animal welfare as part of product labelling. And this is a gorgeous. I have to say this is one of my favourite diagrams I've ever published. It's just from interview data, and the work that we've been doing looking at quantitatively testing this, we're trying to get into a journal at the moment, but this has actually been published in Appetite, and it uses this wonderful laddering technique that looks at different consumer attitudes towards digitally monitored animal welfare and welfare in general, and it really goes through a decision-making process to understand from interview data really why consumers have have the attitudes that they have. And what you can see here, and I will direct you to the paper for further reading, but what is fascinating about the findings is that consumers don't actually, they're not worried when they're thinking about animal welfare. They're not worried about the welfare of the animal. They're worried about what the implications of poor animal welfare have on them. So if a pig is dirty, how's that going to affect my health? If a pig is not drinking clean water, how's that going to affect my health? If a pig is in is being housed in extremely confined conditions, how is that going to affect me and my health? And what are people going to think if I don't buy high animal welfare products? So it's very, 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 it's not it really goes in contradiction to so much of what we know about consumer perceptions of animal welfare, but through the underlying concepts of traceability. And I think my next slide is probably my last slide. And this is some results from the work we've done in the sheep industry. And this is from this is from product labeling research. I'm very sorry about how small this is, but this is A/B testing, looking at the presence and absence of traceability at sort of advertising on product labeling of sheep meat. And one of the most interesting findings is about animal welfare. So consumers, a sample size of about 400 Australians, you can see in the presence of traceability, we're far more inclined to buy products, but based on animal welfare concerns. And what this demonstrates is Australia, in terms of introducing this mandated technology of the RFID ear tags, really missed a trick in its adoption and extension policies. It only focused on farmers and what farmers think of these tags. It missed a trick in that consumers are likely and are wanting more information about the presence of traceability in their sheep meat, and if this had been included, and that transparency through the supply chain, if that had been included, we might have had a better opportunity for farmers to think that this is a worthwhile technology. So fascinating findings from that particular piece of work. Again, that's something we're trying to get published at the moment as well. So if we just go to the next slide, which I'm pretty sure is my final slide. Here's the QR code. Like I say, I'm keen to keep talking, but I've run out of time. So please contact me via LinkedIn for a further discussion if you wish. And here's all the links that you'll need if you're interested in learning more about the sustainability frameworks in Australia and the projects that I've spoken about. But thank you very, very, very much indeed for the opportunity. I hope I haven't gone too much over time,
Don't
and I
worry.
welcome
We
questions.
always, I told you that the time would go very, very fast, and we know it's a fascinating topic. So, what can we do? Thank you so much. That was a really, really interesting presentation. We don't have much time, Elizabeth, but actually, coming from your last points and very interesting points about the consumer, about the market, I had just one question that came to my mind when I was looking to your sustainability frameworks developed by the RDCs. And I would like to know a little bit more about the main drivers and the enablers that made these frameworks possible, and particularly how these frameworks are actually valued by the market and the consumers, if they can actually be reflected in terms of price, or are they just a requisite as an entry point to the market? So enablers first, what is driving these sustainable frameworks to be possible, and also in terms of the market, how are they being received?
Yeah, so I think in the first instance, Australia became extremely aware of what was happening around the world in terms of consumer demand for sustainable products. We knew we were doing a really good job Again, what we needed to do is we needed to make sure in as unbiased manner as possible, because we are self-reporting, is in an unbiased as possible manner, that we could tell a very, very, very good news story about the efforts that our entire agricultural supply chains are undertaking in terms of our sustainability, and make that as transparent as possible. And I think the sustainability frameworks did start with the dairy industry, and then have and other industries have followed. For example, our goat industry, milk and meat, has only just started in their journey of a sustainability framework. So more and more commodity products are jumping on board. But it's really that visibility and that burning desire to prove it. And again, we are acutely aware that if anyone, whether it's a domestic buyer or an international buyer, buys Australian products, they are expensive. They are expensive, and we market our food produce as top quality. And if people want to know why, well, we can show them. The second question through our sustainability frameworks, the second question about the use of the sustainability frameworks. So I would argue that consumers, domestically and internationally, don't know about the sustainability frameworks. But where they are used, and they're not terribly used at the moment in terms of product marketing, in terms of securing either new markets or reassuring existing markets about our sustainability credentials. But what they are used for is buyers of our products, of our Australian agri-food products, if there is ever any questioning. If there is any ever questioning about the validity of our claims, or for example, if a foreign market says, oh, should we be buying beef from South America or Australia? What are the sustainability credentials? We can show them right there. We don't have to try it. They're already there. They're already publicly available, and to make those decisions easier, and the information is essentially available on demand. So yeah, I'm not so confident as to think at the moment that consumers are looking at our sustainability frameworks, but I do know that that suppliers are using them, and particularly if there's ever any trouble about Australian products and sustainability frameworks are easy to show, to say that yes, this is what we're doing.
Yes, very clarifying answer. Thank you so much. And for the enablers, I'm so glad that you didn't mention the levies, because this is not the way. It's more a strategic approach and a strategic position to the problem. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We are really need to move on, but Elizabeth is going to stay a little bit longer. If you have more questions, I'm sure Elizabeth will be delighted to answer to your questions through the chat. Zoé, hello. You're also online and ready to come to the stage. So thank you so much. When you can, the floor is yours.
All right, let me share my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Full screen.
And right? Full screen. Thank you so much. Your turn, Zoe. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much for inviting me today. So my name is Zoé Guy. I'm from IDELE, which is French Livestock Institute, kind of like Australian RDC. In France, we have what we call Agricultural Technical Institute, that goals are to do research and development for different agricultural sectors. So each agricultural sector has its own institute, and so IDELE is the institute for ruminants breeding. And today I will give you some insights on a network we are involved in, which is the DigiFerm network, and on a few technologies, digital tools that has been tested through the network and that are hopefully, well, we hope that can support shepherding. So let me start with a few words on the DigiFarm network. So the goal of this network is to promote digital agriculture to support farmers. The idea is not to develop technologies for technologies, but really to use technologies to solve the issues farmers encounter in their daily life, and to help them make their farms more profitable, sustainable, and to make their work easier. So this network is coordinated by ACTA, which is the technical institute that coordinates all technical institutes on every agricultural sector in France. And the network is made of 18 experimental farms on 9 agricultural sectors. So we have farms on livestock, but also farms working on crops and vines, and also fruits and vegetables. And so what do we call a digifarm, so that you perfectly understand? So for us, a digifarm, to be a digifarm, you have to be an experimental farm operating at a commercial scale and in production. So these are farms that are really similar to commercial farms you can find in France, but with a dedicated team to perform experimentation. All our digifarm are supported by a research and development organism, mainly technical institutes such as IDELE, that are ensuring the objectivity and quality of the protocols we are doing, enabling experimentation to take risks that farmers wouldn't take on their farm, and maintaining links with the industry. And finally, what we are looking at on our digifarm is to have a real digital expertise with the necessary skills and infrastructure to test and validate digital technologies, as well as commitment to digital projects. And so our main activities regarding digital tools on the digifarm is to, we can do basically anything regarding digital innovations, starting with conception in collaboration with agtech companies and innovation stakeholders. We can also do evaluation with our full-scale model to test and validate the performance and suitability of the digital tools. We can also have user feedback with our professionals in the field. And we can also go as far as organizing demonstration and knowledge transfer for the agricultural sectors on the digital tools we tried. And so just to give you a few figures on the network, so between 2024 and 2025, we tested 154 technologies within 101 ongoing projects, including 19 new projects that started in 2023. This represents more than 80 providers of new technologies that have seen their solutions incorporated into the projects involving digifarm. And so to give you a little focus on livestock and what kind of technologies we've been testing. So we've got 12 livestock farms in the network, and most of the technology we tested were about animal health, welfare and behavior, as well as livestock performance and phenotyping. and also reproduction of animals. And one last topic, more transversal to every agricultural sector, but we have also been working on interoperability, standardization, and data sharing between different digital tools. And if we look at the use of the technology, we've tried most of the technology used to observe and measure for 41 projects, which is the biggest kind of use we encounter on livestock tools. But also 7 projects between 2024 to 2025 concerned technology used to organize, manage, and trade in livestock. And last but not least, what kind of technologies have been tested? So for animals, most of the technologies we tested are sensors, either sensor on or in the building for 21 of them, 16 sensors mounted on the animals, also 12 fixed sensors, and 6 sensor or handheld tool. And the second kind of technology we've tested through the network are tools for data exchange and monitoring, or data portals. So again, regarding interoperability and data sharing. So yeah, that's big overlook. And today I wanted to specifically tell you about 2 technologies we've tested in the sector that we think might help support shepherding. So first will be virtual fencing, and second, the use of drones for counting sheep. So first, virtual fencing. So what is the tool we tested? We tested the no-fence collars from Norway. So how does it work? So the farmer, or us, had access to an app and the software to set up the collars, to set up the areas where the animals are allowed to go and graze, and also to see where the animals are. And then you have collars that you animals. They are so the collars work with GPS sensors to know where they are, and then they can send the animals stimuli, first sounds, and if sounds are not enough, then the animal receive a little electrical stimuli that are conducted through the 2 chains on each part of the collars. And the collars also have 2 solar panels for continuous charging and long battery life, so that you can put them on the animals at the beginning of grazing season, and then you can keep them for almost whole grazing season without having to recharge them. So the collars we tried, the no-fence one, they have a cow version and a sheep version, and we tried both of them. We did 3 years of tests, so from 2019 to 2022. This might seem kind of old now, but I can promise you the results are still up to date today. And so we tried them on dairy cows, on beef cows in 2 farms, and also on sheep. And the idea was throughout the different farms to look at different use cases or different questions. First, the impact of this technology, performance and impact of this technology on rotational grazing management, then the impact on animal growth, animal welfare, user feedback, of course. And we also looked a little bit at the cost and time investment to deploy that kind of technology, and also linked to the cost, the possibility to reduce the equipment levels among the herd. So I won't go deep into the results, but just to give you the main ones on the advantages, all our farms that have tested this technology say it is really easy to use. It offers an easy remote monitoring of the animals. With the GPS sensors, you know exactly where the animals are, and it's easy to find them in the pasture and to make sure they are still in the pasture you put them. We had animals that learn really quickly how the system works with a really so for the first few days we would have a lot of electrical stimuli, but after 3 days we have an important reduction of the numbers of electrical stimuli, because the animals learn that just with the sound it's okay, they have reached the limit. We had really few escapes, except in the case of major disruptive events such as thunderstorms. But other than that, everybody stayed where they were supposed to. And we couldn't see any effect on, at least no negative impact of this technology on welfare, on grazing management, or on animal growth. So we could say this is quite a success for this technology. But on the minus part, as I mentioned, we did tests in dairy farming and beef farming and sheep farming on quite intensive herd. We had no real test in extensive conditions such as mountains or remote areas. So we don't know if it would exactly perform as well as it did where we tried them. And also the biggest issue with this technology is that it is really expensive for the gain we had with it. So that's why currently the French market is not so welcoming for this technology today. But even though it's really it works really well, and I get probably everyday calls from our experimental farm saying, "Hey, when can we try use them again?" But yeah. And so with that, I'll go to my next examples about drones for counting sheep. How do we think why would it be interesting? Because in pastoral sheep farming, there are very few efficient tools to count flocks. Today, farmers either use manual or RFID counting, but for that they need a constraint system. And shepherds also use night enclosures to protect the flock from predators. At least that's kind of the norm in France. But with these tools, it's really hard for farmers to know if they have gathered their entire flock or not, or if some are left behind and vulnerable to predators for the night. So our idea was that with the development of drones and AI, maybe we could use computer vision AI to count sheep on drone images. So that's what we did through the Icarus project, which is a European project. So we started by capturing sheep images through drones. Then we worked and used computer vision algorithms to detect the sheep on the image. That's the first step. And then once you have an algorithm capable of detecting sheep, you can track and count them on a video. So that was the goal and how the AI algorithm works for this. And where are we at for this technology? So we now have an open source counting AI that is currently, I'll give you the video of how it counts. So it's currently undergoing external validation, but we have now reached counting performances up to 98%, which is quite good, sometimes way better than what the farmer does currently. But this AI now works only remotely. It's not live on the drones, and that's why we need IDELE and the DigiFarm further collaboration with economic actors that could integrate this AI to make it into a solution that is easy to use for farmers and sheep farmers. So yeah, that's the end of this example. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat or live, I don't know. And if you don't hesitate to follow us. So the DigiFarm Network, we have a website, brand new website. We are also really active on LinkedIn. And I'll give you my email address in the chat as well if you
So
have.
no excuse not to reach Zoe. You have plenty of channels. Zoe, thank you so much for your presentation. I had a couple of questions, but just because I'm very, very conscious of time, I will leave the questions to the end and also wait for our participants to come with the questions. Elizabeth, you have a couple of questions in the chat for you that came through Slido, but to ensure that Louise has the time she needs to present also her brilliant work. Let's move to Louise's presentation, and then we'll discuss at the end of Louise's presentation. Okay, Louise. So when you're ready, please start sharing. We can see your screen.
Lovely. Perfect. Well, thank you for asking me to speak, and it's been really lovely to be on a panel with Elizabeth and Zoe. And I'm going to talk about digital shepherding, but I'm going to give two case studies. One will be my own family farm and what digital shepherding begins to look like in a family farm in the UK. And the other is to look at a specific project that we undertook, where we engaged with the whole supply chain to look at what a good digital future looks like and what were the parameters that stakeholders were interested in being able to identify a good future. So all these pictures at the beginning are all from my family farm. If we think of shepherding in its context, in many of the communities, pastoral communities, shepherding is something that has been done for generations and millennia. And farmers have always used a range of tools, including sheepdogs. I see my sheepdog on the left, to support them in their tasks. The real challenge when we think about digital tools is that at the moment farmers trust a whole variety of technologies, their own knowledge, their understanding of the farm around them, and we are asking them to become confident and to accept the information that the tools are giving them. That is a big ask for many people who have relied solely on their senses in the past. So farmers will have received data in a whole range of ways. They will have turned that into information themselves, and more importantly, into actionable insights. And that's what I'm going to cover today. So how do we, when we use technology, go from that data stage or that metric stage to giving farmers the insights they need to drive the productivity, profit, or reflect on their own practice. In the UK, we are increasingly being expected with our livestock to deliver on multiple levels. Our UK government has signed up to a whole range of international agendas. For example, 30% of the UK being in biodiversity recovery by 2030, the net zero commitments, increasing animal welfare commitments as civil society is looking, as Elizabeth was describing, for farmers to demonstrate and prove their activities. So on an individual farm, not only are we looking at how we look after the sheep in their particular context, and from our particular farm, it is the meat that we are interested in far more than the wool. The meat is our primary output. How do we begin to use tools and technologies so that we can meet all these demands? When we think of regenerative agriculture, you could gather a group of farmers together and ask them what do they think is regenerative, and they will all give you slightly different answers. Just as if you were to ask farmers who perceive themselves as conventional, what kind of sheep production systems do you have? There is great variety. So when we start to look at how we begin to explore what's happening on individual farms and how that can be improved to drive profitability, reduce environmental impact, and also produce the food of the quality and safety required by consumers, we need to combine all the individual farm inputs. We need to think about where we're getting our crop protection products for the food we may be producing, or in the pastures, what type of fertilizer we're using, whether it's artificial or we're producing a more circular system where we're using the manures that are generated on farm. And we are being driven to lower production costs to avoid pollution and to reduce farmer overall risk, and at the same time increase both short and long-term profitability so farmers can invest. And when we look at the cost of some of the technologies and the upfront cost in change, farmers need to drive profitability on their farms in order to be able to invest. So on our own farm, we have sought to look at how we integrate a largely grass-based system with a whole range of technologies that will allow us to reduce our inputs. And as you can see from the first slide, we have embedded on our farm 75 kilowatts of solar, so that for much of the year we are self-sufficient in energy. We have received planning permission for 3 polytunnels on our farm. So the reason for those polytunnels is we can bring inside 750 ewes into 3 polytunnels, which are essentially rain covers. They have corrals at either end. We can produce the forage on farm in a circular model. We can use them. The manures are all in one place, and we can then apply those manures onto the farm in a system where we're seeking to improve soil health, animal health, and reduce the levels of pollution. Why do we bring our sheep inside in December, January, and February? Our sheep are in a New Zealand style system, so they will lamb outside in April. We want them to go on to good grass. If they've been out at grass all winter, they could have caused damage to the soils in gateways. They could have, because of the rainfall, could have led to diffuse pollution. So by investing in our polytunnels, we can better manage both the positive aspects of improving welfare, but also the negative aspects of potential for diffuse pollution or degradation of our soils. We're also investing in a range of technologies on our farm. A Tapari system comes from New Zealand. As you will see in our own particular farm, we have brought in a lot of ideas, a lot of technologies from New Zealand. And we are then looking at how do we adapt those technologies in terms of sheep handling, in terms of being able to weigh the sheep better, to get better data on their health. How do we integrate that into our management of their forage, the fields, and the other aspects that we're being required to address? So on our farm, we're also expected to make space for nature, to replenish and replace the hedges on our farm for carbon capture, to manage our woodland. How do we integrate all of that together? And how, as farmers, can we drive profitability, but also look at the impact of our practices? One of the projects that I've been involved in was titled Speculative Wool Gathering. And we looked at, myself and my colleagues, all the ways in which we could, in an imagined world, so it wasn't real, we didn't develop the technologies and apply them like Zoe. We just said, if these technologies existed, what would be their benefits and what could be their harms? And what are the ways in which you, as a group of stakeholders, from people that worked in the fashion industry, people that worked in wool mills, farmers, people making wool products that they were selling, and developing employment in those areas. What would you like those technologies to do? And how would you determine their value? And one of the things that we thought of, you can see the little makeup, was a robotic guardian dog. So not a dog to bring the sheep in, but to live with the sheep and be able to identify all of those different characteristics that we talked about, to be able to identify when a sheep was on its back, to be able to pick up bird song and be able to identify the bird sounds, to be able to potentially identify predators when they came onto the farm. Now, we don't have wolves in the UK, so we don't have a number of the predators that would be found in Europe, but so our sheep are out all of the time. But we have a lot of footpaths on our farms. We have a lot of people walking on our farms. We have very high levels of open access, which you wouldn't necessarily find in other areas. So how do we monitor all of those things? As you will see, if you look at one of the photos in the middle, people got very busy with Post-its, identifying all the ways in which you could create value, all the values that were important to them, and what they thought would be important in a good future. As a result, we developed a pack of cards that could be used when engaging with stakeholders, either online or physically. We've created these physically as a set of cards, which came out of these discussions. One was you can see the purple cards, the 6 principles of good. And when you heard Elizabeth talking, she was identifying many of these principles of good and why they were important. And we were then talking about the 6 practices of good. And both previous speakers have talked about some of those issues of practices, some of the problems that could occur if I put my data into a system. Who has power in the supply chain? How will they use that data? If I am sharing data, what data is being disclosed and to whom? So farmers, when we use these cards, were able to pick cards that were important to them in terms of both the principles of good in applying digital on their farm, and also what they thought was important as a measure, being able to demonstrate how to deliver good. From all those Post-its that you saw, we then developed all these wild cards, and discussion cards to say to them, right, now you've thought about this future, what things are really important to you, either because they're barriers to a good future or they're enablers to a good future. And I'm not going to go through every single card today. And if anybody's interested in using these in their own research, I can provide you with some of the tools to do that. But you can see the kind aspects that farmers came up with about whether they were moving to a good future in producing wool, or potentially whether they were moving from the world they're in now to a new world that could be regenerative, based on regenerative principles, improving soil, improving animal health. And here's some more. So as a result, we've been working with farmers and other groups to really start to get behind what's important to them in terms of a good transition to a good future, and also to begin to see how this can feed into what insights they need to have as farmers, either to invest in technology, to use technology, or to share their data. If I come back to my own farm, I've put on this particular slide an examples of some of the technologies that we are using on our own farm. Zoe introduced the challenge of interoperability. And one of the real challenges for many farmers that are using this technology at the moment and these decision support tools, whether it's Zero for your accounts, Shearwell for your ear tags, engaging with the Soil Association Exchange because your bank is asking you to demonstrate your levels of sustainability, using iNaturalist on your mobile phone from Cornell so you can geolocate wildflowers as part of your biodiversity mapping, or other natural features on your farm. Cornell, which uses bioacoustics in its Merlin app to be able to identify birds, and you can geolocate them on the farm. And also we've been using a product called Wilder Sensing, where you can put monitors on your farm and then upload the sound, and it will then use AI to be able to tell you the movement of birds on your farm. This all becomes really important because I'm going to stop sharing now so you can see me. Because farmers are having to deliver on multiple levels at once. And so what it is to be a sheep farmer, and whether you're supplying meat and or whether you're supplying wool, is changing very fast. And one of the challenges, if we think of digital shepherding, is how do we create a good future for farmers? How are we going to use the tools we've got so that they can get those actionable insights to really drive their business forward? So thank you for listening to me. Hopefully I haven't gone on too long, so there's still some time for some questions for us all at the end. But thank you.
You were brilliant. Thank you so much. And I think you brought a very, very interesting perspective. Something that is actually very relevant for farmers is the trust source and the uniqueness of each farm, and that makes all this very, very challenging for everyone. While we are closing to the end, I'm just going to share very quickly with our audience our QR code for if you want to start to fill in the questionnaire for your certificate. I know sometimes you need to run, but I think we can now open the floor to these three brilliant perspectives. So we started by hearing that about sustainability frameworks that are, and Elizabeth presented, mainly driven by international markets. Consumers, they still seem to be catching up, although we also saw that they value traceability, specifically in terms of animal welfare. Zoé also brought in how digitalization can support farmers, but of course only if it is affordable, interoperable, and it's easy to share the data. And Louise, you just highlighted how farmers still rely on their own experience, their trusted networks and local knowledge. So my question to you three is, where do you think is the main barrier for enabling this regenerative herds development? Is it about, if we have to start somewhere, is it about the economics? Is it about the data, the trust, or actually making sure that we deal with this farm level complexity? If you were, what would you be your starting point?
Do you want me to go first?
Why not?
Okay.
Thank you.
I think the real challenge is, as it currently stands, whilst the principles of regenerative agriculture have been defined, the actual practices of regenerative agriculture are being defined by a whole range of stakeholders. So retailers have their own regenerative standards. There may be processors that are too. For individual businesses, you can find, if you are supplying to multiple customers, that the demands for what it is to be regenerative, unlike organic, which in the UK is set in legislation, can be very different. And that's why I'm really interested in the work that's going on in Australia, to be able to bring the industry to come together, and the whole sector to say, right, this is the definitive standard. Because whilst we may produce individual standards for marketing, and individual businesses may say, well, we're going to add on and we're going to do all these additional things as well. Farmers need to have clarity on what they're being asked to do. And in some countries and in some sectors, that's currently quite difficult.
Yes, that's a very good point. So for you, Louise, you bring to the table this clarity about the concept and exactly what is required from those implementing these practices in terms, actually what are the practices. Very good, very interesting. Zoé, do you agree, or can you see that data and data sharing among all these stakeholders will help to bring clarity to the concept of regenerative herds?
Yeah, probably the thing is, we have to be careful for regarding that farmers don't see technology as a way to control and spy on their practices. If they share data, it has to bring something to them and not just the industry. That's I think something we have, something that farmers are quite afraid of when they are talking about technologies and data sharing, is that they are afraid of how the data could be used against them when they are, as I see it, technologies should just be a way for farmers to ease their work, make it easier to help them improve themselves by comparing data from one year to another, between each other, to compare and to learn from each other through data, for example, on how to improve themselves. And
Thank you, Zoe. That's an interesting point. Also, it's about trust. Again, we
yeah,
touch on trust, and even in this digital and data systems, we need to ensure that trust is one of the main premises for us to work together in a collaborative way. Also, I think you brought into something that Louise was also mentioning, is that the daily operations of the farm cannot be too disturbed if we are going to interrupt this, to be able to integrate this data, because sometimes it's time to collect the data, it's time to process the data, and this doesn't fit with the daily operations. Elizabeth,
they have to remain farmers. Yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It seems like Australia is a step ahead. We want to learn a little bit more.
Oh, thank you.
No,
Thank you
in
very
terms of
much.
time, you are ahead.
But I
Uh,
will, I will join the conversation by saying that number one, that Louise's thoughts and ideas are absolutely ring true in Australia. But I'll go one step ahead of that, and I'll actually be so bold as to say, a bit controversial, and maybe I should have had it in my presentation, but I was too long anyway. The term regenerative ag in Australia has actually become quite a dirty word. It's become a term that is filled with quite a lot of ridicule. It's become quite a joke. Maybe that's because of poor Australian sense of humour. But the issue really is underlies in exactly what Louise was talking about, in that there is such frustration that we can't find an agreed definition. And so we've sort of said, we've sort of thrown our hands in the air and just said, oh, well, if nobody can tell us what it is, it's sort of become a sort of a philosophical debate. If nobody can tell us what it is, how are we supposed to achieve it? And then once we have achieved it as a farming community, for example, who's going to pay us more for the efforts that we put in to changing our farming practices in chasing this this ideal? And interestingly, I've got permission actually to share something with you that we discussed at the Sheep Sustainability Framework on Tuesday. And if you don't mind, let me read something. And it is specifically about regenerative agriculture. This couldn't have come at a more important time. So the Sheep Sustainability Framework has spent time considering the term regenerative agriculture and whether we should be providing some sort of guidance for readers on the industry's performance in this area. Our deliberations including online meetings with all these wonderful people throughout the world. And we've come and these deliberations have led us to the view that regen ag has become very amorphous and essentially synonymous with sustainability as we apply that word to the framework. In other words, incorporating elements of animal welfare, human welfare, and other ethical attributes, as well as environmental care. So we've been deliberating on this for such a long time. We've sort of gone full circle, and we've just sort of gone, well, it's sustainability. Let's just call it what it is, and take the noise out of those arguments. And we'll call it sustainability. And I thought it was a wonderful case study to share from this week's thinking with the Sheep Sustainability Framework, and I love that term, very amorphous, and essentially synonymous with sustainability. I thought that was wonderful, so I do share that with you by the permission of the steering group chair. So yeah.
Elizabeth,
In
thank you,
essence,
because
agree with
that
Louise.
already answers, I think, from your perspective, kind of two questions we have here in the chat is, you know, how would you single out what is regenerative for you? Okay, so we know we are under a bit of confusion, but if you had to, you mentioned that it's about sustainability, but Louise, Zoé, and even Elizabeth, if you want to elaborate, what is the feature that really makes these systems standing out from the conventional extensive systems? And if you could go just a little bit further, what is the magical digital solution for digital shepherding? If we had to pick one, I know this is very typical, but it could be almost like the marketing questions. From the top of your head, if I say, a drink, what would come to your mind? So a regenerative hearth, what would that be?
Shall I go first again? The term regenerative was originally coined as the complete opposite of extractive and extractive agricultural systems, where where potentially you could argue in some extractive systems, the soil was being depleted. There were challenges around high levels of use of nutrients, and animal welfare was in some systems perceived as not being at the core of the standards and the values and the principles. So regenerative was set as being the opposite of extractive. One of the challenges, especially when you come to sheep, is there are so many sheep systems. I was very clear that we're producing meat. If you go to other parts of the world, their primary output is wool. And we are using totally different breeds of sheep. We have different metrics in what success looks like in each of these different activities. So when you then come to define what regenerative is, it becomes very difficult compared to other sectors where there is much less variability. For me, regenerative means care. And it's interesting that in the sustainability frameworks, the word care appeared an awful lot. Care for people, care for livestock, care for the land. So how you turn that from a very amorphous description into something that's measurable is what is difficult. And farms aren't all coming from the same point. There are some farms that have been highly extensive pastoral farms. So the difference from where they are right now to how people are describing regenerative is quite small. There are others, for a whole variety of reasons, where they have a longer journey towards improving things like their soil, but that could be completely outside their control, like they suffered severe flooding. There's been forest fires around their farms which have reduced the amount of carbon they've got on their farm. So the real challenge when we begin to describe this is for many farmers, things are outside their control. But I think we've got to embed the word care at the heart of regenerative.
Yeah, let's bear that for this actually a great work. We are just reaching the end. But Elizabeth, Zoé, a final remark, a final message to our audience you would like to leave here. What is regenerative for you, or what should we pay more attention if we are actually addressing regeneration? Zoé?
Yeah, no, I don't know if I don't have anything to add to what Louise just said. If I just give some insights on how technologies digital technologies could be used here, I would say that for livestock and also grass and grassland grazing, everything. Technology can, at the first step, be used to get an objective view of what is done and kind of observe and measure what is done currently, and then go from there to improve.
Sometimes this is a faster way to achieve these processes, isn't it?
And
technology is also there to assist us. Thank you, Zoé. Elizabeth, a final comment?
Yeah, so for me, I think I've given a bit of background about what regenerative agriculture, the culture of the term regenerative agriculture means to Australia. But I think also in terms of what I'd like to say, my perspective comes from Australian agriculture, where we farm amongst the most depleted soils on earth. Our topsoils are millimetres deep, if there are any topsoils at all. We are terribly, terribly constrained with water availability. So we're very reliant upon inputs. But for me, the term regenerative agriculture, in addition to what the other two speakers have said, is to me is a concept about farming into the future and leaving farms in a better condition they were either at the end of this year or at the end of my generation of farming. So whether they're short-term goals, medium or very long-term generational length goals, we're leaving our agricultural land in a better state that it was. And I think that comes back to the word Louise picked up on, is care. And so, yeah, I think that's particularly important in the conditions in which Australian food and fibre is produced.
Yes,
Thank
you're
you.
absolutely right. It's about resilient systems that will remain after we have gone. So, you know that we've gone past our hour. I need to close our webinar. It was a true pleasure to guide this discussion and to hear our insights. To our audience, let me remind you that we will continue on this topic next Thursday, same time, same place. I guess the same link. I know everyone is very busy, but you can always count on us. We continue here in this very interesting topic in this our digital corner. If you want, just pop by and we'll be here. Once again, thank you so much to our brilliant speakers. It was really a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much to the team, Sofia, Soraya, Dimitra, and Sylvia. I know you're still there. Thank you. And of course, a big thank you to all the audience, to all of you that were able to join. So I hope to see you next week. So bye-bye. Have a nice rest of the week and nice weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.